presents EMP5.
Alright, so this is a demonstration for how to do EMP Project 5 sampling. So everything we're going to do for this project, you need to do in a sampler. And the sampler we're going to use is the software sampler, the EMP7 in Logic. So we're going to do the entire project in the sampler. So the first thing we're going to need to do here is get an EMP7 sampler up and running, so we're ready to use it. So I'm going to make a new track here. It's going to be a software instrument track for the software sampler. Create one of those. So here's my my blank software instrument track here. Of course, first thing I always do when I make a new Logic project is I want to save it. Logic's going to need to know where to keep all of the samples and the bits and pieces that we're going to be using in this project, so it's good straight away save it somewhere so it knows where to put all the files that it's going to need. I'm going to save my project on the audio drive on my computer. So the audio drive is a place on my computer. Of course, you guys will have the student drive, which is a physical hard disk inside the computer, so the EMP7 is going to be able to read the samples really quickly from the hard disk inside the computer. So make sure you save it on the student drive. Give it a name here, Matt EMP5, and today's date, which is the 14th of June 2011. So I'll just save that there now, so that the EMP7 and the Logic project is going to know where all the stuff is. Important to save it on the machine you're working on. So on the inputs and outputs of this track, here's the inputs and the outputs. It says here I/O, inputs, outputs. So on the input of this track, I'm going to make an EMP7 sampler. Get a few options here. I'm going to make mine stereo, so I can pan my samples left to right across the stereo field, and get a bit of interesting stuff happening with my sampling that I'm going to be doing today. Cool, so there's my EMP7 software sampler. Not quite ready to use it yet though. I've got my task sheet here, which is also on the server, and the first thing it says I need to do is import a provided drum loop. So the drum loop on the server, drum loop 1, I need to import that audio file into the session, work out the tempo before I can start using my sampler and making my song. So that's the first step, so we'll do that first. So to import the drum loop that's been provided, I'm going to need to bring it in on an audio track. So I'm going to need to make a new audio track in my project. I can either do that by clicking on the plus button here, which makes new tracks, or we can go track, new. I like using this plus button because it's nice and easy. So I'm going to make one audio track, and I'm going to have it stereo. So we'll create a new stereo audio track in our project here, and there it is there, audio 1. So the first thing I do is I label that drum loop 1. So the next thing I need to do is pull my audio file in to my Logic project. So I can go import audio file here, and here's drum loop 1, which I've downloaded from the server and copied onto my desktop of my computer. So I'll just open that now. That brings that drum loop straight in on the audio track, ready to go. So I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff over here. So there's this media button up here which hides and shows all these extra bits and pieces. I don't need to see that right now, taking up too much of my valuable space. Let's just get rid of that. So when I have a listen to this drum loop, sounds pretty sweet. I notice first off that the tempo of my current Logic project doesn't match the drum loop. And I can tell if I turn the metronome on. So that's going to create some problems. I need the tempo of my Logic project to be the same as the tempo of this drum loop that I've imported. So I need to somehow work out what the tempo is. So the easiest way to do that, first thing I need to know is how many bars the drum loop is in length. So I can count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So that's 2 complete bars long. So I need to tell Logic, I need to let Logic know that I want to make the tempo of my Logic project. I want it to make it so that this audio loop is going to equal 2 bars. So it needs to change the tempo. Tempo at the moment is 120. I need Logic to automatically work out what the tempo needs to be to fit this audio region here, make it fit 2 bars. So I need to let it know that that amount there, the 2 bars. So I can do this a couple of ways. I can select the region here. I can come up the top to options, and I can go tempo. I can say adjust the tempo using the region length and the locators. So that's saying adjust the tempo based on the length of the region I've got selected and make it fit the amount I've got selected with the locators at the top there. So when I hit this, it asks me if I want to insert a tempo change into my project or whether I want to change the whole global tempo for the whole project. So I'm going to change it for the whole project globally. So what it's done now is it's changed the tempo to being 90 BPM, so that this region length here perfectly fits the 2 bars of the locators. And when I have a listen with the metronome turned on now, so I can hear the metronome's perfectly in time, and also the drum loop loops nicely, so I know that 90 BPM must be right. I'll just show you, I've just undone that a different way, another way that you can also achieve the same result here. If we open the sample editor, so we can either click sample editor here, or we can just double click on the audio file to open it in the sample editor. Another way of achieving the same thing, I can go functions here and I can say adjust the tempo by the selection, so you can choose a selection of your audio file in the sample editor here by highlighting it, and locators. So that's another way of achieving the same thing. Cool, so that's the first step of EMP Project 5. I've imported the provided drum loop and I've matched the tempo of my session to the tempo of the drum loop.